spent almost a whole year building this app here, and today I'm going to share with you the biggest pitfalls that you should avoid when you're building an app right now. For those of you new here, I'm Giorgio. I've been working with small teams for the last couple of years when they were growing from zero to their first couple of thousand users, and I helped them build their technology in a way that it supports this growth in the early stage. So let's get started with a few of my mistakes that you don't have to repeat to make your app a success. So the first problem is being too slow. The reason that most people say you should launch early is to get early feedback from your existing users to steer your direction, but this is only half of the story. Why this actually matters right now to be fast in the market is because there's many teams and many companies launching tools quite quickly, and this not only creates competition for you, it also means that users are adapting workflows, and it's harder to integrate later on into these workflows once they are established. And all of the companies or teams that are launching products that fit that workflow have already established trust, which is the other part why speed matters, because the earlier you are with your users, the more touch points you're going to have and the longer they will know you. For example, now I've been working on this app for 1 year, no one knows about it. All of my competitors have started quite early launching Discord communities or early versions of the product, so people know them. And although we've been building on this product for the same amount of time, people trust my competitors more because they've been in the market and public for longer, and I'm just the new guy, it seems like. So you want to avoid that trap of not sharing early enough what you have and not building this speed to market momentum that you should have to establish trust, to avoid people adopting other workflows or missing out on integrating into the workflow, and also, of course, to get early feedback. So if you're looking at why actually are you slowing down, well, I can show you my example. It was because of the features. I wanted everything to be perfect. So I integrated a lot of different ideas into the final thing, and I have a very high expectation on the user experience and on the product and on the overall scope. So I just wanted to work for people. And if you have this attitude, that's noble and noteworthy, but I would challenge you to simplify the scope. So in my example, I was building a whole multi-collaborative whiteboard with an offline first synchronization. I will share more on the technology architecture later on. But for now, the one thing I want to get across here is the tech stack is very complicated already for the whiteboard. And then I added this collaborative AI agent that can make edits to the whiteboard, which is a big project in and as of itself, and a whole search engine so that people will build their own knowledge base and their searchable data system while they are actually building their content on the whiteboard. So you can basically draw a line around all of these ideas, and these represent one standalone app per se. So if you find yourself in this position where you see that you have 3, 4, or 5 complicated ideas and they only make sense when you combine them in a product, then I would ask you to go back to the drawing board, figure out what is the one single thing that you can build, the one single feature that will stand out against other tools, because building 3 complete apps into one app is just, well, a lot of time, a lot of energy, and it's going to slow you down a lot. And it gets significantly worse when you also have to think about how to make all of this technologically happen. So usually you want to be very precise, very good when you code. If you're coming from more like non-technical side, if you're coming from design, you might fall into the same trap to want it to look and feel super good. And if you're more into the tech side of things and been writing code before, you might want this code base to look super clean and have the best architecture, but this is not what users are going to pay for, and this is not how you're going to launch fast. So you definitely want to simplify the code base and the design as much as you can, but it comes with 2 important considerations. For the design, it's a good practice to just use the patterns that already exist. So you can simplify a lot and you can create user experiences based on what already works and what users understand. You want to avoid like using fancy words, fancy labels, fancy icons. And I found the investment to communicate clearly what each button is doing and to communicate clearly what happened and if there's an error, something to pay off, because users kind of trust your product more when they see what's happening in which moment, even when it's loading or failing. So that definitely turned out to be a good investment. And also for the architecture stuff, you want to be aware of which database technology you want to use, how is user data persisted. I went a bit too crazy with this. This is another mistake that I did because I wanted it to work super fast, offline first. So I had this offline database and the synchronization to the remote database. And this is where things get kind of ugly because you're investing, again, a lot of effort into creating a super well-designed database while you're not even having users. So the better way to do this is to use the standard databases. So you can do a quick research on what works for your use case, but then basically just stick with the standard approach and don't worry too much about latency or about offline availability and all that stuff, because it's just going to slow down your development process. And it's going to help you avoid the mistake that I did. So I was building a system that scales up to 50,000 users now, and I have 20 users. So no one is actually benefiting from all of the effort that I put into the database layer. But I will say one thing, that if you put a little bit of consideration into the database design, it's going to save you a lot of time later on, because throughout the past 12 months, I've been changing a lot on the product and not a single time did I have to drop and recreate my whole database. So I think this was one of the core principles for me, to keep my user data always secure and safe and maintainable. And I never had to drop any of my user data or lost any of the user data. So that's, I think, a point for me. But other than that, I've lost a lot of time on just over-engineering the whole database synchronization layer. The tech stack is quite complicated, so I would challenge you to simplify that. And also the design turned out in the end. Simpler interfaces were just more understandable, simpler to build, and faster to realize. So as I've been building this thing throughout the past couple of months, I've stumbled on another important part, which I think not a lot of other people talk about, which is integrations. So usually the approach would be you just build this standalone app and you have a sign up form and then people do something on their platform, and that might work for some cases. But especially if you're working on something that integrates into the overall workflow of a user, you need to understand the ecosystem, like what's the tooling, what's their goal, where do they come from when they enter your app, what is the data that they bring, what do they do with that data, and where is that data going to end up in, like what's the next step after that. And if you do that, it's basically a no-brainer to understand, oh, there's something like an integration, how data comes into the app, and another integration, how data leaves the app, so that you have people in that workflow and you can kind of integrate into that. In my particular case, I was building the MCP, so it integrates with the search API so that AI agents can query the user's knowledge base. So I was reusing the complicated tech stack that I built for the whole search experience. So lucky me, I could reuse a lot of that stuff. But yeah, basically adding that integration helped me now to integrate this whiteboard into all of the users' workflows when they're working with AI agents. But by becoming aware of the overall ecosystem and workflows, I was able to create this MCP server that supercharges every user's AI experience. So when users are now asking ChatGPT or Claude or Cursor or Antigravity, they always can draw from that well of data that they have accumulated in the whiteboard. And that was the essential part to figure out, oh, all right, the whiteboard is actually the knowledge base for the users, and I want to build a lasting knowledge base and integrate that into all the other systems. So understanding like the connection points that AI agents might want to save knowledge to the knowledge base, and that most of the creation workflows will draw knowledge from the search API was super important to understand how this app actually integrates into the ecosystem. And the last point for today is probably the most important one, which is about distribution. And I have heavily underestimated how important it is, especially now that it's so cheap to build a new product and you end up with so many competing products, customers being kind of annoyed or exhausted by all of the stuff on the market. So you really need to figure out how do you reach the right people. And I will share a few of my mistakes here, one of them being distributing it to my friends. So while it's cool to have early feedback from some users, you want to make sure that these users are actually your target users, because my friends, not all of them are the target users. And if they then give you feedback, what they would appreciate in the app, it's going to misdirect you, and you need to be clear on who you actually want to build this for, and then listen to the feedback of your actual target user to make the app better. And not only are you building a distribution channel just to distribute the app, it's also a part of the brand that you're building and an important asset to establish trust with your users. So the longer that you're around, the more touch points you will have with everyone who is running into your app, and the more they will trust you. Yeah. So I've already mentioned that my competitors have been doing this way, way earlier than me. And I can see that it worked quite well for them, that they have like a community going on and people talking about the product, basically cheering for them or showing that there's like real people behind the product who want to really make that work. And that's going to help you establish a lot of trust with every new person that comes in. So you cannot really start early enough building this distribution channel. And therefore, I wouldn't really say it's a distribution channel per se, but it's just your voice in the market. So with this consideration, I wouldn't even say this is a distribution channel. I think it's easy to think of it as an acquisition channel and that you're just doing it to get new users. And while I understand the notion here, the actual thing that you're doing is you're putting yourself out into the market. You're building actual real connections. I would challenge you to think of this more like a brand voice, that is not a distribution channel meant to onboard new users. That's a side effect, of course, but it's also about standing in the market and standing for something, maybe even polarizing people and taking a big stance so that people know who you are, who is your character, what you stand for. Like, you don't need to over-engineer this, but just being aware that this is more like an ongoing project and it's an integral part of building an app. It's not just creating ads or creating some way to onboard users, but actually some way to help and add value. And by thinking about distribution in this way, and by changing your mindset about distribution more towards building real connections, it becomes a day-to-day task of fostering these connections and investing into these connections. It's not just anymore about building the product, it's about adding value to other people's lives. And you already do that through a proper distribution channel without them even signing up. And I like to think about it in this way because it reminds me why I'm actually doing this, who I'm helping with this, and it helps me to build real connections. And most importantly, it avoids this trap of thinking about distribution as a task list item versus as an ongoing process of building a brand. All right, that's my wrap up for today. On this channel, I'm going to share more of my challenges as a solo product builder and how I overcome these challenges. Right now, I'm at a very interesting point, which is basically I'm at zero. I've been investing all of my savings into building this app. So now I have this app with around 20 users. I don't have a follow-up freelance contract right now, and I'm about to figure out what to do next. The goal is to eventually build a product with a working business model, but right now it's pretty uncertain how that would work. And I think it's just the ugly stuff most of the other product builders are cutting out, the part where you don't know what to do and you're like figuring out the next steps and hitting wall after wall and have to figure out how to overcome that wall. And I want to share more on this process, sharing the walls, how I overcome them, and the new directions that I'm going to take while I'm building this product, or maybe a different service or a follow-up product. Let's see what happens. So if you're curious to hear more, make sure to subscribe. See you soon.